Hi guys, thanks for stopping in and having a listen. My name's Stuart King and today we're doing a bit of a lesson on the tune Midnight Blue by Kenny Burrell. And it's a classic tune, and a few years ago I did a recording of it, which is on my YouTube channel as well, and I've always enjoyed playing that tune. And I thought I would go over a few things in terms of, to try and help some people out in terms of, you know, some soloing approaches and some things I've kind of probably developed since then, and just a bit of an analysis of the tune in general and what's happening. So it's probably a good idea to follow along to get a copy of the notes from this lesson. You can find them at the link below, so you should get all the scales that we talk about in this lesson as well. So yeah, go and grab a copy of those if you like, because you might find it a bit more useful to follow along. Now, first things first, I want to quickly have a bit of a brief look at the harmony. I'll get straight to the scales as soon as I can, but there's just a few things we need to look at in terms of what's happening in the tune. So first of all, what Kenny plays in the melody, the form is the same. It's still a 16-bar form. However, the chords might be slightly different, and we'll talk about those in a moment. So first of all, let's just have a look at what's happening in the intro of the tune, and then we'll get straight into the soloing. Okay, so first of all, we're starting in the key of F minor, and Kenny kind of starts off with this vamp in F minor. Basically, you've got a bass kind of doing something like kind of this kind of figure, something like that, and he's playing like the, so these kind of chordal figures here. You know, so together they might sound something like this. Now, basically what's happening there is that's just over the F minor chord. Okay, and that's kind of setting up the tune. So that's a really useful way of kind of playing over the F minor chord, is using these kind of little moving lines here. And what the actual harmony is there is it's a F minor 7 chord to a G minor 7 chord to an A flat. So basically that kind of figure. And we're not really thinking in terms of F minor, G minor, A flat, G minor. We're really just thinking of that as just a way of walking around the F minor chord, and adds a lot of interest. You can hear Kenny do this on other tunes. For example, there's a recording of Summertime where he plays a similar kind of rhythmic figure. So that's the first thing. So when we're looking at what he's doing there, we're just going to treat that as F minor. Now, it might be useful to look at the arpeggios and maybe using those chords in a different context for sure. But to start off with, we're just going to consider that F minor. Now, when the tune actually kicks off, we notice here that he kind of jumps in on the C7 sharp 9 chord at the end of each kind of little rhythmic figure. And the bass still maintains this same kind of figure. Something along those lines. So when the bass is coming back on the G, Kenny's hitting the C7 sharp 9 chord there. So we're basically getting this that kind of thing. Now that only really happens during the tune. So that's not really worth us considering at the moment in terms of the soloing approaches. Okay, so that's what happens in the first 8 bars. So we're really thinking basically moving between the F minor and the C7 sharp 9 back to the F minor kind of sound. Now, moving along, we'll notice as well that the next part of the tune, so we finished the first A section, the first 8 bars that is, and then we move on to the next bit. Okay? So there are chords there, and basically what that is, what the harmony is there is G minor 7 flat 5, which is also known as G half diminished, to C7. And Kenny is playing some extensions on those chords. For example, on that C7, you notice that we've got a flat 9 and a sharp 5, okay? And on the F minor chord, we're playing like this fourth kind of voicing here. I believe he plays. Then what we do here is we go to actually this B flat 7 chord here. So that those 4 bars become G minor 7 flat 5, sorry, G minor 7 flat 5, C7, F minor 7 to B flat 7. Again, I added a few extensions there. Now, in the soloing section, he doesn't, when you listen to what the bass is doing and you have a look at the solo, there's no, you don't hear him going to the B flat 7 chord, or at least you don't hear the bass. It really just becomes what we call a minor 2-5-1 progression. So we're really getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the 4 bars there. Now, I will say though that you do hear Kenny at some point in the solo imply that B flat 7 chord. So in a jazz chart, you'll often see things where you might see a chord written, for example, F minor 7, and in the following bar you might see a B flat 7, but written in parentheses, so a B flat 7. So indicating that we're only playing it, you know, if we feel like it kind of thing, or maybe, you know, so I'm treating that as just a regular 2-5-1, and you are welcome to add that chord in as a little extra bit if you like. So that does happen in the melody, but not so much in the solos. So the next part of the tune is where there seems to be some confusion regarding what's happening with the harmony here. Now, if we look at what happens, Kenny plays after this this phrase here. He plays this here. Okay. Now, if we look at that chord, it could be analysed in a few different ways, but the two most obvious ways would be a B flat minor 9 chord. Okay. We could also think of that as a D flat major 7 chord. Okay, and then we go to the next chord, which is this one here. And that could be analysed two ways as well. We could think of that as an A flat minor 9, or as in a D flat 13 sus. So basically a D flat 7 sus type sound. So what are actually the correct chords, and what does it sound like is happening there? To my ears, when I first hear this chord, I don't hear it as a D flat major 7, which is what I just played. I hear it as a B flat minor 7 type sound, so it's B flat minor 9. And the reason is if we listen to it in the context of the harmony, so we've done a 2-5-1 in G, in F minor. Okay, I'm not hearing this as the next chord. That's D flat major 7. I'm hearing, so if I do the 2-5-1 again, I'm hearing the B flat. That sounds correct to me. And if you listen to what the bass player is doing, you do hear some sort of figure where something along those lines. I'd have to check. But where it gets confusing for people, I think, is that you can hear the bass player really hitting a D flat note quite a lot. And a D flat note is actually part of the B flat minor 7 chord anyway. Okay. Interestingly enough, we could achieve an interesting effect if we did treat this as a D flat major 7 chord. Going from one type of D flat major, or one type of chord to another. And that really adds a interesting kind of colour there. It's almost like a bit of a pedal. But nonetheless, let's look at that chord. So I think what's happening there is after the B flat minor 7, we are actually going to an A flat minor 7. So we can consider that to be A flat minor 7 or a D flat 7 sus or a D flat 13 sus. Now, what I think is actually going on there is he's doing both. We're getting B flat minor 7, A flat minor 7, D flat, to C7. Okay, so I think that's what the harmony is doing there. You may argue that it goes from B flat minor 7 straight to the D. Again, it could be a bit ambiguous. You might have to see the original chart to know for certain, but just use your ears and have a listen and make up your own mind. As far as I'm concerned, the progression goes B flat minor 7, A flat minor 7, D flat 7, C7 sharp 9 there, and that kind of fits nicely with what he plays. So So the interesting thing about those last 4 bars is if you listen to what's happening in the solos, you find that the A flat minor 7 chord is mostly omitted. It's really just 2 bars of B flat minor 7 most of the time. And then if you listen carefully to the bass, you'll notice we go straight to a D flat chord, which I'm hearing as a D flat 7. Or it could still be the D flat 7 sus to C7. Now, jazz players in this context in a trio, Kenny would have had a lot of opportunity to add whatever extensions he wanted to use, and if he felt like he wanted to add that chord, which I think he does at some point in the solo, then he's got a lot more freedom there. So you might transcribe or listen to the solo or look at it and see a few things going on. You go, well, it sounds like he's doing this here, and he probably is, and that's the flexibility you have in playing in a trio. And with really good musicians and a good bass player, you can kind of follow what's going on and have a bit more flexibility there. But for the purpose of what we're doing today, we're going to treat the last 4 bars as B flat minor 7 for 2, D flat 7, C7, and back to the top on the F minor. One more thing I will say about that is that in the solo over that F minor 7 that we have for the first 8 bars, we're not seeing that same thing we see in the introduction where we're hitting the C7 going back to the F. We're not hearing this little, we're not hearing that figure, but we do have more of a walking bass thing happening, whatever it might be, like just on the F minor chord. However, you do hear Kenny alluding to the C7 chord quite a bit halfway through roughly, where he does, I'm not sure if I'm playing this right, but it's something along these lines. Starts playing some chordal phrases, and that could be something, he's basically playing F minor 7, going to the C7, back to the F minor, to the C7, back to the F minor, and that's a common device. When you have a static chord, for example, for a longer period of time, it's quite open for you to add stuff like that. So he might have even played it off here. Go and check the transcription if you're interested to hear what he played over that. So you can do that, but it's still, the basic harmony is F minor for the first 8 bars. So let's start looking at how we will approach playing this, improvising over that solo. So first of all, it does have a classic kind of hard bop sound to it, and we're hearing a lot of our classic minor pentatonic phrases, even the melodies based on it. And a lot of what Kenny is doing in the solo, if you listen, is based on the F minor pentatonic scale. He's doing lots of little runs and scalic type things there with that scale. So the F minor pentatonic scale would be a very useful sounding scale. Stylistically, it'll give you everything you need over that progression. It really fits well. So the first thing I would do if I were to practice using the scale is firstly learn the 5 positions. You don't have to learn all 5, you can learn one at a time. So most guitarists know the minor pentatonic scale. It's kind of like usually the first one most people learn. So I've written them out for you anyway, all in the key of F minor, so you don't need to do any key shifting or anything like that. So go and get a copy of it if you find it necessary. So in practicing that, the first thing I would do is I would you could play along with a recording, or better yet, play with somebody else. If you don't have those options, we don't always have a bass player or handy. You can record yourself on your device, or you can even use a looper pedal. I've actually got a delay pedal here, and sometimes I just create the loop just with that. It doesn't have a very long loop time, but for example, if I were to practice, I might set up a loop and just practice improvising over that. Let's see if I can do it. So I've got a loop there. Hopefully I got it right. Close enough. So the thing I would try and do here would be just to practice playing short, simple phrases. If you look at what Kenny does, it's just very clear phrases. There's not a whole lot of, running around, and he is, interestingly enough, he is kind of like responding to himself with the chords. You know, he plays a little phrase. Again, I'd have to. He plays some sort of riff, and then he kind of puts in a fill and a riff, and so he's kind of comping for himself, and which is really cool because that's opening everything up and giving us a lot of space. But anyway, so if we start off with our first scale being the F minor pentatonic scale, the first thing I do would just be to practice playing short, simple, and clear phrases like Kenny does. And yeah, like I said, just set yourself up a loop or something, and you can do this at home really easy, and it's a lot of fun. So short phrases, and try with, often it's good to make a clear statement and then have a follow-up response. I'll see if I can try that. So I might try and limit myself to say 5 or 6 notes. We'll see how we go. Okay, so that's the first phrase, and then another one. Cool, and another one. Yeah, so just keeping it really simple there, and just kind of mucking around with it. And again, once you get more familiar with all the different positions, you can have a bit more freedom rather than being stuck in one area. Okay, so I kind of added an extra note to the F minor pentatonic, and you probably recognize that. That makes it the blues scale. So the blues scale is the same as the minor pentatonic scale, but with an additional note. So if I let's play down here still. So if I start off with F minor pentatonic here, the blues scale is simply adding a passing tone between these two notes here. So that's the note that gives us our colour. So instead of being a 5-note pentatonic scale, we now have a 6-note scale. And an octave higher. There it is there. It's good to learn to shift between positions too. So there it is there. There it is there. So again, same thing. And I really see them as interchangeable. The F minor pentatonic and the F blues scale for me are more or less the same thing, just with an added passing tone. So, you know, and just do the same thing. Practice your short phrases and, you know, see how you go. So, yeah, try to keep it clear. I'll try to see if I can come up with a couple now, just to see how it sounds. So just muck around with it and see if you can come up with some kind of cool ideas. I like to kind of be able to link all the patterns up and create interesting little lines and licks and stuff there. Okay, so that is they are probably 2 most useful that are going to get you that sound like on their recording. Now, looking at the chord progression from the introduction, from the melody, this little pattern here very clearly outlines the F Dorian scale as well. Now, F Dorian is definitely a very good choice. It takes us a little bit away from that sound, but it does give us, from that hard bop sound, a little bit, but it does give us the opportunity to add a bit more colour. And even when creating some lines and things, it can really open things up, especially if you're playing double time or chromatic style lines. It can really add a nice effect. But the 2 notes that you'll get out of that are really nice, which will add a nice bit of shine to your solos. The 9th degree or the 2nd degree of the scale, which is the G natural over the F minor chord. Okay, here it is again. So that 9 is really nice sound, and we also get the natural 6, which is a D note. So we can add those notes in now. There's the 9. And like I said, that gives you the opportunity to add some longer lines. When we get to soloing, we won't be thinking really at all too much. You shouldn't have that. You should have that. That should be second nature by that time, hopefully. Okay, so they are the two scales. So F Dorian, again, I would learn that in 5 positions. There are other variations you might try, such as 3-note per string patterns or whatever. But to start off with, if you're not familiar with those, learn them in 5 patterns, and I've already written those out for you, and you can go and download those. So for example, so that's the first pattern, for example, and another pattern here. And then here. And so forth. So yeah, basically we can just move them around and kind of, they can actually fit with the chord position as well. So for example, this chord will have the F Dorian pattern kind of sitting within this chord. I won't go through them all, but you can go and look at the sheet anyway. And same thing, and you can just kind of muck around with them and learn to link them up. Again, it's probably a good idea to start off with just short phrases, you know, like so moving along, the next thing that we come across after the first 8 bars of the F minor is what we call a 2-5-1 progression, which we mentioned before. Now the 2-5-1 progression is G minor 7 flat 5, C7 to F minor for 2. As I mentioned, we can go to the B flat 7 chord on the 4th bar. Again, I'm thinking of 4-bar groups at the moment on the 4th bar, but it doesn't really happen on the recording. Kenny alludes to it at one point, but we're just going to treat it as just 2 bars of F minor. So our scale choices for the F minor 7 chord will stay the same. So F blues, F minor pentatonic, and F Dorian. But for the minor 2-5 progression, we do need to actually have a look at what's happening there. So G minor 7 flat 5, being chord 2 in the key of F minor, the ideal scale choice, being in a minor key, would be G Locrian. Okay. Now, when I say scale, technically, Dorian and Locrian, they're actually modes, but scale and a mode, kind of same thing. All right, so, but Locrian mode would be the appropriate one here in this context. So, for example, that's the sound of that scale there. Okay. Now, what gets interesting about this next chord, the C7 chord, is that we can probably have a few different scale choices. In the key of F minor, you will notice, if you know your key signatures, you'll notice that we actually have an E flat note. So in the key of F minor, whereas the C7 chord has an E natural note. So we need to kind of fit that in. So what we can do there is literally just keep the F minor scale the same, the F natural minor scale that is, which is also known as Aeolian mode. What we can do there is basically just change this E flat to an E, but keep the rest of the notes the same. So C, D flat, E flat, F, G. Oh, no, I messed up. Sorry, C, D flat, E natural. Yeah, F, G, A flat, B flat, and C. Now, what that actually gives us is a mode of the harmonic minor scale. Okay, I'll do it 2 octaves. Gives us a bit of a, I don't know, kind of a Spanishy flamenco-y sound or something. But that's a very useful sound there because that gives us all the notes that we need. However, it's still nice to keep that E flat in there, you know, because that gives us what we call our sharp 9. So over a C7, that's our sharp 9 right there, the E flat. So we can actually also keep that E flat as well as the E natural to get this kind of bigger scale. Now we're moving to an 8-note scale. So now we have some options. Okay. those scales, there are different names. The first one I played is the fifth mode of the harmonic minor scale. So that's the fifth mode of the F harmonic minor scale. We were taught, when I studied jazz harmony, I was taught that that was called a Mixolydian flat 9, flat 13 scale. So that's the kind of, I guess, the Berkeley name for it. I think I've heard people refer to that as Phrygian dominant. What it's called isn't really that important. It works. So Mixolydian flat 9, flat 13, or fifth mode of the harmonic minor scale is a really useful sound. And then if we wanted to keep the sharp 9 degree, or like the minor third, which is the E flat over the C chord, and create a kind of scale that kind of incorporates both, we could call that one Spanish Phrygian. Now that was a name for it that I was taught many years ago. Some people may think of Spanish Phrygian as a different scale. For example, the first one, some people may call it that. But I believe that this one, as far as I'm concerned, is called Spanish Phrygian. Okay, so those two scales are really, really useful. Again, much like the blues scale and the minor pentatonic scale are kind of interchangeable. They're the same thing, but with one extra note. I see this in the same manner, so I don't really think of them as separate so much. I just kind of see, if I'm playing over a C7 chord, I'll be thinking in my head, what note do I want? I'm just going to grab that note that belongs to either. And that fits really nicely. It gives us all the correct extensions over the chords. So, if we look at the melody, over that C7 chord, so both of those scales give you the flat 9, the sharp 5, or the flat 13, and the natural third. One other thing I might say, which we won't get into, I don't think it's necessary to work on these, but in the key of F minor, often you would use the F natural minor scale as well. But because of the harmony of what's happening in the start of this song, we are really hearing the Dorian tonality. So there's no need for us today to worry about the F natural minor scale or Aeolian mode in this context, because every time we're hitting an F minor, we're really going for the Dorian sound, which gives us that note, rather than the natural minor scale, which gives us that's not so much the sound, but again, you certainly can use it. So that's worth investigating too. So again, I would just do the same thing. I would just kind of record myself playing the progression and just kind of loop it and practice it. So, just do a walking bass or just comp the chords or something. So, let's see if I can do it. Alright, I'll try using those scales over that progression. Okay. I think I recorded myself doing that. Anyway, so that's kind of mixing and matching that. So kind of have the first chord, and then the next chord. That was the C7. Back to resolving to the F minor chord. And that's a really nice sound. And another thing that you could try and do as well is really working on the arpeggios of the chord. So the notes of the chord played separately. So for example, over the G minor 7 flat 5 chord, and the C7 chord, F minor 7. That gives us some really nice sounds there. And when you're soloing, rather than just running up and down the scale, you can really target the notes of the chord. So I might just re-record that progression and try use some arpeggios to kind of outline the chords, so you can see how that will mix with those scales. Again, you can learn all the 5 patterns for each of the arpeggios as well. So the F minor 7, G minor 7 flat 5, C7, and so forth, and that will be really helpful for you to be able to navigate the chord changes a bit easier. So I'll just quickly do another loop for us. Okay. I'll try and use the arpeggio. So, and then C7. Sometimes they add the flat 9 to the arpeggio, the D flat. And that actually gives us more of a diminished sound. That was a D flat diminished scale. Arpeggio, sorry. Anyway, that's certainly a useful sound as well. But just for now, I'll try and focus on the G minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio and the C7 arpeggio and the F minor, and maybe with a few color notes in between, which I'll really get from the scales primarily. Here we go. Okay, so you can kind of hear how that sounds. Again, play around with it and learn your arpeggios in different positions and things. For example, C7, you learn it up here. F minor. Very valuable to learn this stuff. Very hard to kind of improvise without knowing where the notes of the chords are and what notes you can use, from the scales and that sort of thing. Okay, so we're coming up to the end now. The next part of the song, we would go to the B flat minor 7 chord. Okay, and as I said, I'm pretty sure they're sticking to the B flat minor 7 chord for 2 bars, even though Kenny does a thing where he plays the A flat minor. Nonetheless, I'll show you the scales for both so you can mix and match. It's really simple actually here. We're going back to our good old Dorian mode again. So over the B flat minor 7 chord, a Dorian scale would be perfect. Okay, and you can hear Kenny do something like that, I think. Something like that. I think, if I remember correctly. So yeah, practice that, and then the A flat Dorian scale as well. Okay. Now the next part gets interesting in that if we look at the progression as being B flat minor 7 for 2 bars and then a D flat 7 chord, the D flat 7 chord is actually quite interesting because in the melody he plays this, as we discussed earlier. That actually has a natural 11 or natural 4th degree. That creates like a D flat sus kind of sound. Often in this type of progression, you wouldn't use that natural 11 sound. You would often use a sharp 11 sound, resolving to the C7, which would then resolve to the F minor, right? So we've got a D flat 7 to a C7 resolving back to the F minor, right? So I believe Kenny has kind of just written D flat 7. Like I believe he would have communicated to the band just D flat 7. If you look at a lot of jazz charts, you'll see often the extensions are kind of up to the interpretation of the band or the performer or whoever. So in this instance, the only scale that is going to be suitable on that D flat sus chord would be a D flat mixolydian scale or mixolydian mode. And Kenny does something in the solo, I think. I can't remember actually. Something like that. And then moves to the C7. Anyway, you can hear he kind of is thinking probably more of the D flat sus sound there. So the reason why I bring this up is that if we decide to use the version where we have a sharp 11, right? So the D flat 7 sharp 11 type sound, which is very common in this context, then you've got a different scale choice. I know the scale choice for this one as being Lydian dominant, and it's actually a mode of the melodic minor scale. Okay, so it has a very different sound. Now, both are actually fine, in my opinion. If you're very specific about wanting that D flat mixolydian sound, then in the chart you'd write D flat 7 sus. Okay, and then that would be very clear to the improviser that a D flat mixolydian sound is going to get you the right notes. So that's the mixolydian. Okay, so you can interchange between those, and we'll write both of them out for you to try. And when we get back to the C7 chord on the final bar, same scale choices as before. Okay. So really, the last four chords would basically be B flat minor 7, 3, 4. I'll record it. Just at the end there on the D flat 7, I did use the sharp 11, okay? But let's try it without. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much all of the scales covered. I think if you really just kind of familiarize yourself with just a few patterns there, you should be pretty good. The context in which you kind of choose your notes is really just dependent on the sound you're going for. So again, there are other scales that you could certainly use that would be sound just as good perhaps to your ears. Again, they're just sound, and just think of your scale choices as a collection of notes. Don't think of a scale as being the be all and end all, because they're just a set of notes that sound a certain way over a certain chord. Okay, so just experiment with them and play with them, and just practice the short phrases and just kind of getting used to the sounds, just much like I was doing. I'm really just playing around here and kind of having fun with it. And then hopefully when you get out there and start playing in a band or soloing over this tune, you'll just find that you'll be comfortable enough that you don't have to think about it, and hopefully you can express yourself musically. So in this kind of way of working with this shorter bits and pieces at a time, I personally find that more useful. Pick a chord, kind of get used to playing over that chord, move on to the next chord, and groups of 4 are really good. 4 bar progressions or 8 bars. 4 and 8 bar cycles are really strong usually, unless you've got a tune where it's written in a different kind of, the harmonic rhythm's a little bit different, for example. But yeah, it's definitely worth using that approach, and then you can kind of just glue them together, like piece them together slowly. So that's a really good way of familiarizing yourself with it. And again, you can work on different devices. Again, this is just using the melodic approach, picking the notes, but there are a variety of other things. And if you listen to that recording of Kenny playing, as we were saying before, using chordal things, and you could use octaves like Wes. I think he would have played it more like that. Using 2 notes at a time, like some stuff like that sounds really good. Kenny does something like that. 2 notes at a time kind of thing. That sounds really good. So we're changing our density and, just giving yourself a variety of options. You could have a melodic thing where you're doing short statements. You could do some more linear things where you're playing longer lines. For example, we were talking about, using some patterns. That's basically like a very chromatic, almost Pat Martino style kind of line. That you could use that, and that could be a way of adding excitement. You can use really bluesy phrases, and these are all just devices, that you can use to solo. Again, the key word here is phrases and musical ideas. We're making a musical statement, we're not just playing notes and playing scales. That's really what we're getting down to here. So yeah, thanks for stopping in. I hope you've got something out of this. Please let me know if anything else that any other questions you might have in the comments below. And subscribe to my channel, because I'll be hopefully putting out some more of these over the coming weeks. And also, and don't forget to get yourself a copy of the scales, which I've all written out for you as well. I might even add an extra sheet if I get around to it, and add a couple of those arpeggios for you to try out as well. So so subscribe for more goodies, and until next time, have fun.